Thank you for inviting me to participate in the ITEC conference. I also want to give a shout out to Tara, Nick, and Jason. They've been really helpful getting me from New York to Australia. I'm just excited that this is the first time my face has appeared in Australia, and my body is going to follow in November. So hopefully I'll get to meet some of you then. But I'm very pleased to start my journey to Australia now with you. I think most of your conference focuses on K through 12 initiatives that happen in the classroom, and because I'm coming from a museum, that makes me a bit of an odd fit. But Bridget and I agreed that it would be useful for you to learn about how and why we teach art online at MoMA, and so I just thought we'd start with why. Why not? Next slide, please. A few years back, there was a light bulb that went off in the heads of many art museum directors, kind of at the same time. And at least in America, that's made a dramatic shift in museum work. The actual numbers that you see here on the slide are, of course, different for different museums, but the ratio is about the same. So many more people come to our museum virtual doors, our websites, and what have you, than actually come through our physical doors. And the directors began to think, well, there must be something we can do, substantial something that we can do that will engage these visitors and make them want to come back to our websites or hopefully to our real locations. So that's sort of the big idea background of why museums like MoMA have started reaching out in fairly substantial ways to visitors all over the world. Next slide, please. Our first response to this new initiative was to try a whole bunch of digital things, like we built blogs and we made apps and we tried e-publications that you could read on your readers. And those are all fine and very successful. But the one thing that was sort of a dark horse that someone on staff just happened to have, not me, it was my predecessor, happened to have the knowledge base to do this. They said, well, we should really try online courses. Our on-site courses are so successful. Why wouldn't it work online? And 3 years later, we have a huge international audience, as you can see on the slide. We're up to 3,600 enrollments, 61 countries. So it's a pretty widespread in a short amount of time. And I think from that point of view, next slide, please. I just want to also bring in to the point where to tell you about a new initiative that maybe you've heard about because it's focused on K through 12 teachers, but the company Coursera, which is one of the larger MOOC providers, they came out of Stanford University. 2 computer science professors decided to teach the world, and they've been incredibly successful in a very short amount of time, built substantial software that is quite robust and flexible to use. And originally, as you might all know, the MOOCs, the massive open online courses, were really intended to be for university instruction. But they just recently announced that they wanted to focus on K through 12 teacher professional development, and they invited us to be part of that initiative. And we were very, very excited to be part of it because honestly, we can never provide enough support for our teachers. We do a number of programs during the year. We always have to turn teachers away. And the idea that it would be for free for any teacher around the world to experience was just too good to imagine. So as you see on the slide, we already have 9,000 teachers enrolled in our Coursera course, which starts July 29th. But I'll invite you all to join in. It's only 4 weeks long, and school wasn't even start yet, so maybe you'll have some fun. We really designed our first course to be as adaptable to any kind of teacher from any content discipline could find something in it. It's really about building your ability to guide and direct inquiry-based learning in your classrooms. It's the same technique we use in the galleries. You don't have to use it with art, and we're really super interested in seeing what will happen in our first MOOC. Our MoMA goes to MOOC. So next slide. So basically, my simple answer to why is that it comes directly from our museum mission. That is, our task is to educate the world about modern and contemporary art. So now for the how. Actually, I wrote a short blog post recently on the MoMA.org blog site, which is a very brief summary of what I'm going to say to you today. So my present to you is that you don't have to write anything down. You can just go to the MoMA.org blog called Inside Out, and you'll see the highlights of what I'm going to say. So, and if any of you are tweeting, be kind, please, because it's 10 p.m. here in New York City, and I should have been in bed quite a while ago. So I have a team of 2 others, a production assistant and a 12-month intern, and between the 3 of us, we develop all the content, of course, with the teachers that will go into the online courses. So my thoughts today are really about how do you think about building content for an online course. And I hope that they'll be helpful to you as they are for us. I think one of the things we have to get over, because I was trained as a live museum teacher, not a classroom teacher, but I spent 20 years in the galleries teaching about modern art and other kinds of art. The thing is that it's a little bit of a flip, right? Because when you're teaching live, you spend a lot of time guiding the process and making last-minute decisions and working with your students to make sure the content's working. But when you're preparing an online classroom, you have to pre-imagine everything that the students are going to want to learn. And for that reason, a lot of teachers feel like it takes a lot longer to teach online than it does in a classroom. And I think it's just because we're used to spending a smaller amount of time preparing and doing the magic live. Whereas in preparing an online environment, you really have to create the magic in advance and understand how it's going to unroll in your students' experience. So it's a little bit of a flip. Next slide, please. Here's our list of topics currently available. We have 6 courses, and it's a big challenge to break a museum up into equal and interesting parts. How do you do it? I really want to dissuade you from taking the encyclopedic approach because that's the most obvious, let's start with chronology. We'll start with 1850 and we'll move, forward. We do have 2 courses that do that. There are survey courses, just like you would find in a college level class, and they're very popular. But, not everybody has 10 weeks to invest in constructing the history of modern art. And generally the people who do are the ones who already know and love modern art. We also want to build courses for people who, they haven't jumped into that pool yet. They haven't, they only need to dip their toe into the modern art water. So for them, we have 5-week courses. They're much more thematically based. And those have been popular because sometimes people don't really know what they're going to be doing in 10 weeks. I barely know what I'm going to do next week. Next slide, please. So if you do have the leisure to be inventive with your topics, my first advice would be to listen to your students. When you're teaching in the galleries, you hear questions like, why is this photograph ugly? And what is the point of a room filled with wrapped candy? Or how does this performance belong in an art museum? So those kinds of questions made my colleague Pablo Higuera create the course called 5 Puzzles of Contemporary Art. And the course is designed to help visitors understand some of the most bewildering artworks. Another time we observe that visitors, they ask a lot of questions about color. Color is a very important element to artwork in modern art. And so we thought, well, why couldn't we tell the story of modern art through color? And why stop at modern art? We can include design and architecture. So that idea birthed a course. It's a little longer course. It's a 8-week course on color and color theory. And it basically traces the history of modernism through color. Very popular, of course. I'm showing you a page, the first page actually from that course, just to give you a sense of what it's like to be in a MoMA online course. And it's organized, kind of like a magazine spread. On the left, you have a menu. The top, the block of topics at the top are really different subjects that students need to know to feel comfortable in the online environment, and how to arrange your browser, and even how to participate in a discussion. Sometimes students have never done that before and they need to know some rules. And then you'll see that each week has a set of modules. So if you're in the self-guided course, you just progress through everything at your own pace. If you're in the instructor-led version, you can you basically unveil. You get to each week. Every week you have a new set of course content to explore, and then you check in with your colleagues and participate in discussions that the teacher is moderating. Next slide, please. So speaking of teachers, teachers are super important, don't we think? And you know, teaching online is, it's an art. It's an art form. We actually make our online teachers do a screen test. It's true, Andy Warhol style. Can you imagine? But it's super important to get teachers who are comfortable and relaxed on the video camera. It's amazing for me. I know a lot of these educators for a number of years, and they're fantastic in the gallery. They're so warm and inviting, and the audiences love them. And then I put a camera in front of them, and they freeze up and they become robots and super uninteresting. So sometimes we work with them. You know, sometimes it's just a little bit of experience and training to get over the hump, but sometimes it's just not the medium for them. And when it's the only contact you have with the teacher, when you're tuning in from Jakarta, Indonesia, it's really important to have that kind of screen appeal. Next slide. The other tricky thing is that studio teachers need to be able to not just be great on screen, but they also need to be able to talk about what they're doing as they do it. And that's not every artist can do that. It's really sort of like chewing gum and walking at the same time, which I guess for some people is hard to do. But I couldn't do the art studio demonstrations and be, you know, cutting a Matisse cutout and be scintillating in my discussions. It's pretty tricky. We often hire the MoMA educators who've been with us for a while and know our audience as well. And in particular, we like to hire the educators who have both an art history, or either one actually, but sometimes both, art history and studio art practice. Corey D'Agostine, who you see in the bottom right corner, is also an art conservator. So he's three of those things. And I use the top image just to remind you that sometimes we incorporate teachers into our courses through Google Hangout, which presents us a live opportunity. We're going to do that in our new course starting in the fall on the history of video, sound, and performance art by having an artist interview happen on live. It seems that would be the right thing to do if you're doing a course on sound, video, and performance, that you should have something live in that regard. So we're going to try that out too. So there's a lot of ways that you can bring teachers into an online classroom environment. Next slide, please. So my third thought is, I call it the treasures. And you might think that because I'm from a museum, I'm talking about the collection objects, but actually the treasures are also the people inside the museum. They are and also rarely seen materials from archives. Putting together this course for the fall, I found the original press release from one of the exhibitions that was done on probably a very early typewriter, that you could still see the erasure marks in the press release that got sent out to hundreds of people. It's kind of funny in this day of word processing. We have recordings of interviews with artists that have visited MoMA. We often tape the expertise of art conservators who have really interesting things to say about the state of the art that we're looking at. There's so much knowledge throughout the staff of the museum, and because the students who come to our online courses aren't really able to visit the museum, we try to bring as much behind the scene materials to them as possible so they can feel this connection to our place. The slide that you're looking at now is in the exhibition a landmark exhibition of photography by Cindy Sherman, and Pablo Higuera, one of our instructors in the online courses, is interviewing the curator, Eva Raspini, about Cindy's very original concept of beauty in her photography. And it's great to be able to capture a moment like that in an exhibition that is so ephemeral, especially since a lot of our visitors, they'll never come to MoMA, or they'll never see that exhibit anyway. So we're able to capture some of that exhibit magic for them. Next slide, please. But of course, exploring the permanent collection for golden nuggets is what we do most. And, here's an example. I bet you guys didn't know that MoMA had one of the largest and most important collections of Fluxus art. You may not even know what Fluxus art is, but it was a very important art form in the 60s, and much of it is very ephemeral. There were things that were written down, there were magazines that were made, so you might walk into the gallery and just walk right by it, because you know what? Most of that stuff was meant to be performed. But as an art museum, we don't really have a space for performance to be happening on a regular basis. So what we did is we found that we have on staff a Fluxus artist and expert. His name is John Hendricks, and he agreed to perform a Fluxus work of art for the course. And you see him in the lower right-hand corner. He's holding a pitcher of water, and he's pouring it over a trash can. And if you could hear this performance right now, you would hear a stream of water going fast, slow, according to a score that he's internalized. And that would be an example of a Fluxus performance. Now we have not only a great piece of content for our course about, on this particular week we were looking at performance, but we also have a great element for the archive. And we try to think about that when we're creating the content. Many times I'll make an interview much longer if I have an important artist at the mic, just because it's such an unusual event and I would want to include that content in the archive. Next slide, please. So, just like in your physical classroom, learning online should not ever be a passive experience. And you know that experts in both neuroscience and pedagogy all agree that if students can make something or teach something, in other words, put their knowledge into practice, that subject is more likely to become a permanent part of their memory. This is a page from our online discussion area in which students are sharing their abstract works based on their studies of Jackson Pollock, famous American abstract painter. Justin here in green has just posted his 4-part painting that he made as a result of the assignment for that week. And underneath you would see all of the students that respond to his work and provide critique. And that would happen in an on-site studio course. Here, sometimes the students feel like it's easier to participate about their own artwork online because they're not there physically in front of it saying, hey, I did this. There's like a little step of remove that they're posting it there online and you're looking at it there, which I think is a really interesting introduction. We thought the studio courses wouldn't really fly when they were originally made. We did it as a kind of a risk. And it turns out the studio courses are actually incredibly popular. People love to have that community around the making of art. And more often than not, the groups that gather in these courses of studio courses end up becoming Facebook group friends, and they have a continuing experience with that.
Deb, you've got 2 minutes. We're just running a bit over.
All right, that's fine. Let me just get to, can you skip through to slide 14? And that's 2 slides, and we'll go to triangulation. Well, we can do that one, yeah. Just to say that learning online should be inspiring and self-directed, just like visiting a museum. And so this is a great quote by Joseph Albers. He was talking about color, but it could also be relevant to how people learn. We really try to take advantage of all the ways that we can present things, sometimes even the same content. And then finally, let's go to slide 16. Which is 2 slides ahead, just to talk about how important it is to track your activity with your online courses. So we join the Facebook groups, we communicate with the alumni afterwards, and we also, next slide, do a lot of surveys, which collects really important data about what they experienced in the course, and we make iterative adjustments going forward when we can to tailor it to their needs. So those are my 6 thoughts. I hope they're helpful. I hope some of you will go and make your online courses on your own and tell me all about it when you're done. I don't know if we have time for questions, but
we've got time for one question.
Okay.
Who's going to be the lucky person?
Who's the lucky one?
It's going to be ACO.
I'm just wondering if there's a cost to participate in the course.
Oh, that's a good question. So the Coursera MOOC for teachers is absolutely free. The courses are, there is a cost. It ranges depending on how long the course is and whether you're a member or qualify for some other kind of discount. I'm happy to say that teachers get a discount. It's the same as the members discount. The most expensive course is $350 for a 10-week survey course. And then it kind of goes down from there. That would be instructor-led, and then it goes down to the self-guided courses where there's no instructor, no interaction, generally run around 100, 150. And we also have an agreement with University of Alaska to offer professional development credit for the courses. So a lot of teachers are able to get their courses paid for because we can offer credit to them.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Deb. Can you please give Deb a round of applause?
My pleasure.